Have you ever found yourself staring blankly at something without really being there, as if your body was present but your mind was running an invisible marathon you never signed up for? Maybe you feel like you're living with a racing mind, jumping from thought to thought, starting things you never finish, getting distracted in the middle of simple tasks, forgetting appointments, feeling guilty for delays and broken promises. Maybe you've learned to call yourself lazy, disorganized, a mess, or worse, maybe someone else did that for you. But what if I told you that none of this defines who you are? There's a silent pain that few people truly understand, the pain of trying your best and still falling short, waking up full of plans and going to bed realizing nothing went as expected, living at war with your own brain. The world demands focus, consistency, productivity, but what if what you lack isn't willpower but understanding? What if the problem was never you, but the fact that you've been fighting without a map, trying to navigate an inner labyrinth with your eyes blindfolded? So many people live like this, without knowing it has a name, an explanation, and, more importantly, a way forward. Maybe everything you've always felt, the restlessness, the impulsivity, the struggle to finish things, the fear of failing again, maybe all of it has a root that isn't guilt, but neurodivergence. Maybe what you need is not more effort, but more compassion. Today we're going to talk about that, about what it's like to live with ADHD, about what it means to feel out of place even when you're trying so hard to fit in, about what it's like to feel exhausted, but by your own mind. But before we continue, I want you to take a deep breath, because this conversation isn't about diagnosis, it's about liberation. It's about finding answers for a lifetime of questions. And if by the end of this journey you see yourself in the words we explore together, I want you to know you're not alone, you never were. Imagine living inside a mind that never shuts off, a mind that leaps from thought to thought, like jumping across loose stones over a raging river. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or simply ADHD, is not a phase. It's not a trend of the digital age. It's not the result of poor parenting, too much screen time, or some kind of overreaction. It is a chronic neurobiological disorder that directly affects attention, self-regulation, and impulse control. And most importantly, it stays with a person throughout their entire life. In childhood, it may show up as restlessness, difficulty focusing in class, or impulsivity that many mistakenly label as bad behavior. In adolescence, ADHD transforms. The teenager often deals with harsh self-criticism, a sense of not fitting in, extreme procrastination, and sometimes the beginning of anxiety or depression. And in adulthood, the disorder hides in constant lateness, unfinished to-do lists, drawers full of abandoned projects, a history of frequently changed jobs, difficulty maintaining stable relationships, and a chronic exhaustion that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul. There are three subtypes of ADHD: predominantly inattentive, predominantly hyperactive, impulsive, and the combined type, which includes traits of both. In the inattentive type, the person gets lost in details, forgets appointments, and struggles to maintain focus. In the hyperactive, impulsive type, there's a constant need for movement, excessive talking, acting without thinking, interrupting conversations. And in the combined type, one lives in a whirlwind. The body and mind seem incapable of following simple commands like wait, finish, breathe. The brain of someone with ADHD works differently. Neuroimaging studies show changes in areas related to attention, motivation, and inhibitory control. There's also a dysregulation in the levels of neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine. This means that often the issue isn't the task itself, but how the brain processes reward, pleasure, anticipation, and urgency. People with ADHD tend to seek intense stimulation to stay motivated. That's why many of them shine in moments of crisis, in high-pressure situations, in environments that demand creativity, but struggle in rigid and repetitive structures. Recognizing that this is real, that ADHD has a biological basis, that it affects millions of people worldwide, that it is not made up, is the first step to breaking a cycle of guilt and shame that can last for years. Knowing it's not weakness, not a character flaw, not immaturity, is freeing. And from that recognition, we can begin to rebuild habits, self-esteem, identity. If you see yourself in these words, don't be afraid. You are not a manufacturing defect. You just have a kind of mind that needs different strategies, a unique language, a gentler rhythm. And we're going to explore that together. Maybe what hurts the most isn't the diagnosis itself, but the number of times you've tried and failed. Because someone living with ADHD isn't someone who doesn't try. Quite the opposite. It's someone who wakes up with hope, builds grand mental plans, promises themselves that this time will be different, only to find themselves, hours later, buried once again under the mess, the distraction, the nameless discouragement. It's like chasing your own footsteps in an emotional marathon where the finish line never appears. And each failure, each setback, each unfinished task becomes an invisible brick in the wall of self-judgment. People on the outside don't see this. They only see what's missing, what didn't get done, what was left incomplete. And then they say, just get organized, just focus, just try harder. But no one sees the sleepless nights spent trying to concentrate. No one feels the racing heart when you're trying to finish something and your mind screams for a different stimulus. No one witnesses the paralyzing panic of a blank page, a difficult conversation, a commitment that already feels late before you've even gotten out of bed. ADHD steals small victories from everyday life, and in doing so, it silently chips away at the confidence of those who carry it. You begin to see yourself as someone who can't, and that label sticks to your skin. What's that called? A belief in incapacity, a vicious cycle that turns effort into a prelude to failure. The pain of disappointing yourself is one of the cruelest kinds because it comes from within. It doesn't need an audience, just a mirror. But what if I told you that the effort you make is real, even when it's invisible? That the simple act of fighting against your own distraction every day demands more mental energy than most people use to complete a task? That your struggle isn't laziness, but a quiet form of resilience? ADHD doesn't erase your will, it just changes the route. But that doesn't mean the destination can't still be reached. The pain of failing when you truly tried is deep, but it doesn't have to be permanent. When we look at that pain with compassion, with science, with therapy, with strategy, it can transform. Not into instant success, but into understanding. And understanding is the soil where self-esteem can begin to grow again. You deserve to know this. Your effort matters, even when the world doesn't see it, even when the results don't show, even when you doubt it. The simple fact that you're here listening to these words already proves that you haven't given up, and that is already a victory. It's hard to put into words the loneliness of a child who grows up hearing that they are the problem, that they can't sit still, that they talk too much, that they disrupt others, that they need to behave like the other kids. They don't understand why they can't stay seated at their desk while the teacher is talking. They don't understand why it's so much harder to focus on a simple task when everyone around them seems to do it with ease. They just feel it. They feel that something inside them is wrong, and that feeling sticks to the soul. The childhood of someone with ADHD is often marked by disapproving looks, disproportionate punishments, and frequent notes in their school planner. So-and-so doesn't finish assignments. She doesn't pay attention. Your child is disrupting the class. For few adults have the training or the sensitivity to realize that this isn't defiance or apathy, but a silent cry for help. The child tries to fit in, tries to obey, but the mind races, the body fidgets, the words slip out. And then come the cruel nicknames, the unfair comparisons, the failing grades, the constant message that they will never succeed. And when this happens over and over again, what began as a neurological trait becomes an emotional trauma. Because the child grows up believing they are the mistake, not that they simply have a different way of functioning. They internalize failure. They build defenses. Some become aggressive, others withdraw. Some develop severe anxiety. Others fall into depression before adolescence even begins. But in all of them, something breaks: their sense of belonging. Parents and teachers, often with the best intentions, can become sources of pain when there is no understanding of ADHD. The constant corrections, the public scolding, the lack of listening, all of it shapes the identity of a child who never feels good enough. They learn to hide their feelings, to lie to avoid punishment, to stay silent, to avoid mistakes. And that silence stretches into adulthood, a silence filled with rejection, shame, and fear of being who they truly are. But here's something you need to hear. None of this defines who you are. The child you once were did the best they could with what they had. If you grew up feeling inadequate, out of place, too different, I want to remind you that your difference is not a defect. It's simply a mismatch between the world and your unique way of existing. And now as an adult, you can begin to rewrite that story with more truth, more compassion, and less guilt. Maybe today is the day to look at the child you once were and say, you were never a problem. You were a miracle trying to survive in a world that didn't understand you. And that alone, that changes everything. Inside the mind of someone with ADHD, there exists an entire universe, vibrant, pulsating, filled with ideas that burst like fireworks, one after another, in nearly uncontrollable successions. It's a mind that doesn't know the pause button, that gets excited about everything at once, yet struggles to maintain focus in just one direction. The hyperactive mind is both engine and cage. It can create brilliant projects in minutes and forget them just as quickly. It can dive into an almost supernatural hyper-focus on a fascinating subject while completely disconnecting from the world around it. That's why ADHD carries a painful duality: immense potential, blocked by an unstable operating system; remarkable talent, hidden behind forgetfulness, lateness, distractions, and impulses. It's like having a sports car with the most powerful engine on the road, but with faulty brakes and a misaligned steering wheel. The feeling is of always being on the edge of losing control, even when everything on the outside looks fine. Intense creativity, non-linear thinking, heightened sensitivity. These are all common traits among people with ADHD. Many are artists, entrepreneurs, inventors, problem solvers. They think outside the box because they never manage to fit inside it. But the same brain that creates, imagines, and inspires it also confuses. It forgets important dates, speaks without thinking, procrastinates without intending to, and then comes the guilt, and with guilt, judgment, and with judgment, the fear of being exposed as inadequate. This hyperactivity isn't just in the body, often it happens in the silence of the mind. Even while still, someone with ADHD is thinking of 1,000 possibilities. Sleep can be a battle, relaxing, a challenge. Meditating, nearly impossible. Because the brain is always on alert, always jumping from one thought to another, always trying to find meaning in the chaos. And when the mind never rests, the body begins to suffer. Exhaustion sets in. Anxiety creeps in. The forgetfulness starts to feel like personal failure. But here's something that needs to be said out loud. This mind is not broken. It is different. And every different mind deserves to be understood, not battled. It needs support, structure, adaptation, not labels and punishment. When guided with love, direction, and the right tools, the hyperactive mind becomes a force of creation and innovation that can transform everything around it. You don't have to fight your own brain. You can learn to dance with it, to live with it, to create with it, not by trying to tame the storm, but by learning how to sail within it. There comes a moment in life when ADHD stops being just a school-related challenge and begins to touch every area of existence: work, relationships, home organization, finances, sleep, nutrition, everything. What was once seen as restlessness or inattention begins to morph into a collection of small daily failures that accumulate like a silent storm. Adults with ADHD often carry a history of interrupted jobs, unfulfilled promises, planners full of post-it notes and alarms that go off but don't solve anything. The lingering feeling? Incompetence. A chronic sense of always letting someone down, including themselves. In the workplace, ADHD may show up as lateness, difficulty meeting deadlines, physical and mental disorganization, loss of focus on repetitive tasks, trouble prioritizing. And even with intelligence, talent, and good intentions, performance fluctuates. And that fluctuation, in the eyes of managers and colleagues, is mistaken for irresponsibility. The dismissals come, or self-criticism increases, or both at once. And when work becomes a minefield, the adult with ADHD begins to question their own worth. In relationships, it can be even more delicate. Forgetting birthdays, interrupting conversations, changing the subject mid-sentence, making promises and not following through, leaving things unfinished, all of that hurts. And those living with someone like this often interpret these actions as disinterest, selfishness, or even disrespect. But what they don't see is the immense effort behind each small attempt to get it right. People with ADHD don't love less. They just love differently. More impulsively, more intensely, sometimes more confusingly, but deeply and sincerely. Yet when that love is misunderstood, it becomes just one more source of pain. And at home, the chaos continues. A full sink, forgotten obligations, difficulty maintaining routines, procrastination hiding behind a phone screen, or endlessly reorganized tasks that never get done. The mess isn't just external. It reflects an overwhelmed inner world, where everything happens all at once and nothing seems to fit. And when adult life demands organization, discipline, consistency, the person with ADHD finds themselves in an invisible battlefield, trying to survive in silence. That's where guilt is born. A corrosive guilt that eats away from the inside. Guilt for not being a better partner, a more present parent, a more stable professional, a functional adult. But here's a truth that needs to echo inside you. You're not failing from lack of love or effort. You're struggling because you're trying to live with a mind that operates on a different rhythm, and you're doing it without a manual. When we begin to look at these struggles with empathy and awareness, everything changes. Because you're not lazy, messy, or unstable. You're someone who fights every single day against a system that wasn't designed for the way your mind works. And even so, you're still here, trying, listening, seeking help. That's not failure, that's courage. For many adults, the diagnosis of ADHD arrives like a late whisper that suddenly echoes far too loudly. It's as if, in a single moment, an entire life is seen through a new lens. Those scenes, once filled with guilt, shame, and inadequacy, now gain context. Oh, so it wasn't just a lack of effort. So it wasn't just disorganization. So it wasn't just my personality quirk. The diagnosis doesn't erase the pain of the past, but it offers what may have been missing all along. A name for the chaos. And more than that, a path forward. Discovering you have ADHD as an adult can be liberating, but it can also be overwhelming. Because along with understanding comes grief. Grief for the child who endured unfair criticism, for the teenager who spent years trying to fit in, for the adult life marked by stumbles that might have been avoided if someone had seen it sooner. It's a silent grief, an intimate grief, that only those who go through it truly understand, the grief of someone who realizes they've fought too hard, with too few tools. But there is light in that process. Because the diagnosis, even when it comes late, is a key. It opens doors to a new way of seeing yourself. It allows a person to reconnect with their own story, this time with more kindness. From the moment the label shifts from incompetent to neurodivergent, the internal gaze shifts too. What was once interpreted as a character flaw is now understood as a clinical challenge, and that changes everything. Many adults say that after the diagnosis, they were finally able to forgive themselves, forgive the unfulfilled promises, the lost relationships, the abandoned jobs, the interrupted dreams. Because now they understand they weren't failing. They were simply trying to survive inside a mind that no one had ever helped them decode. And that awareness, on its own, is a powerful form of healing. If you've received this diagnosis later in life, or if you're starting to suspect it might apply to you, I want you to know, it's not too late. It's never too late to understand yourself, never too late to change the narrative, never too late to begin again with a new lens, one that welcomes, understands, respects your limits and values your strengths. You are not broken, you are misunderstood, and now that you can see yourself more clearly, you can finally live more freely. When it comes to treating ADHD, many people still respond with resistance, fear, or even prejudice. Maybe you've heard phrases like, "I don't want to depend on medication. That's just an excuse," or "Everyone has a little bit of that." And it's understandable. The way mental health has been treated for so long has left deep wounds, especially in those who've always been labeled as dramatic, lazy, or messy. But the truth is simple and liberating. Seeking treatment is not weakness. It is an act of courage. ADHD is a chronic neurobiological condition, and like any chronic condition, it can and should be treated with a multidisciplinary approach. That means there is no magic bullet, no single miraculous solution. Treatment involves a set of integrated strategies that, when combined, help build a more functional, balanced, and lighter life. Often, the first step is psychotherapy, a safe space where you can explore your pain, patterns, traumas, and the ways of thinking shaped throughout your life. Therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, have shown excellent results in treating ADHD, helping individuals develop self-awareness, emotional organization, and practical tools to face daily challenges. Another important part of treatment in many cases is medication, and here we need to remove the stigma from this topic. Medications like methylphenidate or lisdexamfetamine are not drugs to make you more productive. They are neurological regulators that help the brain function with more stability. They don't erase who you are. They reduce the noise, the internal chaos, allowing you to access your abilities with greater clarity. The decision to use medication should always be made with medical guidance, and each person responds differently. But the point is, medication is not a prison. It's a tool. In addition, there are highly effective complementary strategies, personal organization techniques like using timers, visual planners, time blocks, and positive reinforcement. Regular physical exercise, which boosts dopamine and improves focus. Balanced nutrition, regulated sleep, mindful breaks. And for those who can access it, support from professionals such as neuropsychologists, psychiatrists, and even specialized therapeutic coaches can offer additional guidance. Many people report that once they begin treatment, they feel reconnected with themselves, as if a fog begins to lift. What once felt like frustration becomes clarity. What once was exhaustion turns into hope. And the most beautiful part, treatment doesn't turn you into someone else. It helps you become who you've always been, without the constant weight of battling your own mind. You deserve that lightness. You deserve to live with less pain and more understanding. Treatment is not the end of your freedom. It is, in many cases, the first step toward a life of greater autonomy, balance, and authenticity. When living with ADHD, daily life can feel like walking a tightrope between intention and execution. You know what needs to be done. The problem isn't ignorance, it's implementation. The ideas are there, the goals are clear, but between thought and action lies an abyss filled with distractions, impulses, fatigue, and mental overload. That's why, more than willpower, what you need are the right tools. Small strategies that turn chaos into structure, without suffocating your spontaneity. One of the most effective is the Pomodoro technique. Working in short bursts, usually 25 minutes of full focus, followed by a 5-minute break. It sounds simple, but for someone with ADHD, this method creates a controlled sense of urgency while offering a clear reward, the break. It helps outsmart procrastination and impulsivity, two of the biggest daily hurdles. Another valuable tool is the use of visual checklists. Yes, lists, boards, mind maps. The ADHD brain responds better to concrete stimuli than to abstractions. Having visible tasks with progress markers helps the brain stay on track. This works not only for work-related tasks, but also for personal routines like brushing your teeth, making your bed, or taking medication. Anything that's visual becomes easier to follow. Using organization apps like Trello, Notion, or Google Calendar can also be a game changer, with a caveat: they only work if they're simple and straightforward. People with ADHD tend to abandon complex systems, so start small. Set daily priorities. Use colors to separate categories. Choose just 3 major goals per day, and celebrate each one when you complete it. Another essential practice is emotional self-awareness. Learning to recognize when your mind is on the verge of overload, when anxiety is starting to take over, when mental fatigue turns into a block. Emotional self-regulation is a skill you can develop with the support of therapy, guided meditation, and therapeutic journaling. And don't underestimate the power of pausing for 5 minutes, closing your eyes, and simply breathing. That pause can save you hours of frustration. Create task starting and ending rituals as well. People with ADHD often struggle to begin and to finish tasks. Creating a ritual, like playing a specific song, lighting a candle, putting on comfortable clothes, or telling someone you're about to start something, helps signal your brain to shift into action mode. And when you finish, take a moment to thank yourself for doing what you could. Never downplay your small wins. And finally, practice what we call active self-compassion. That means replacing "I should have" with "I'm trying." Swapping "I never get it right" for "today was hard, but I'll try again tomorrow." ADHD won't disappear, but with the right tools, it stops being an invisible enemy and becomes a companion you learn to understand, respect, and manage. You have the right to function differently, and you have the right to live with more ease. These tools aren't meant to make you like everyone else. They're here to help you be yourself with more balance and less suffering. Living with someone who has ADHD can be challenging, but the challenge doesn't lie solely in the other person. It lies above all in how you perceive and respond to their behavior. Many partners, parents, teachers, and co-workers live in a constant tension between empathy and frustration. After all, how do you understand someone who is always late, who forgets important commitments, who seems unaware of basic social expectations? How do you love someone who often interrupts, gets distracted, acts impulsively, even when they swear they'll improve? The key lies in one word: understanding. ADHD is not a choice. It's not neglect. It's not indifference. It's a neurological way of functioning that affects focus, memory, emotional regulation, and motivation. That's why anyone living with someone who has ADHD must understand that certain behaviors aren't signs of disrespect. They are symptoms. When we begin to see the other person through this lens, judgment gives way to compassion, and the relationship starts to change. If you're a parent of a child with ADHD, know that your child needs much more support than punishment. They need structure, but also affection. They need limits, but with active listening. Above all, they need to feel loved, despite the difficulties, not here because of what they can deliver. Constant criticism only reinforces their sense of inadequacy. Instead, celebrate every small achievement. Create clear routines, use visual reminders, be patient with forgetfulness, and celebrate successes as if they were big victories, because for them, they are. If you're the partner of someone with ADHD, remember that this condition can affect communication, planning, and emotional empathy. Sometimes they won't remember yesterday's conversation, not because they don't care, but because their brain is overwhelmed. They may seem disorganized, but internally they're trying to manage dozens of thoughts at once. Honest dialogue, paired with routines and mutual support, makes all the difference. Create systems together. Use shared reminders, talk about triggers. Not to change who the person is, but to learn how to live better together. If you're an educator, co-worker, or friend, understand that the behavior of someone with ADHD may confuse you. But before you judge, ask, how can I help you organize this, or want to split this task with me? Helping someone with ADHD means offering structure without control, offering support without treating them like a child. And when that support shows up, trust begins to grow. Above all, people with ADHD need others who validate their pain, not minimize it, who recognize invisible effort, who understand that a simple reminder can be a powerful anchor, who know that love, to be real, must be adapted to the needs of the other. Living with someone who has ADHD isn't about having endless patience, it's about developing awareness. And when that awareness turns into action, a deeper, more empathetic and more authentic bond is born. Living with ADHD often means existing in contrast to the world. It's having a mind that runs at its own pace, in a system that values consistency, discipline, and linear thinking. It's living with the constant feeling of being one step behind, always owing something to yourself and others. But within this journey, there's something many people don't see, and something you might not have noticed yet. There is an immense strength behind your story, a strength built in the quiet of the night, when you tried once again to get organized, in the moments when no one understood you but you kept going, in the daily effort not to give up on yourself, even when everything seemed to slip through your fingers. Those who live with ADHD have to develop survival mechanisms early on, creativity to improvise after forgetting something important, flexibility to handle the fallout of unplanned impulsivity, heightened sensitivity to read emotional cues, and adjust behavior in difficult environments. These strategies, built almost instinctively, reveal an incredible adaptive intelligence. You learned how to survive without a manual, and that alone speaks to the power you carry. The pain of feeling different can become strength when it turns into awareness. The difference that once hurt becomes recognized as a unique kind of talent. Sensitivity transforms into empathy. Impulsivity channels into action. A racing mind organizes into explosive creativity. How many people do you know who think fast, find out-of-the-box solutions, shine in moments of crisis. How many brilliant names in art, science, literature, and entrepreneurship have been diagnosed with ADHD? What the world calls a problem is often just a rare way of seeing reality, from an angle few can reach. But for that strength to bloom, you must take an essential step. Reframe your pain. Stop seeing yourself only as someone who fails, and start seeing yourself as someone who persists. Someone who doesn't fit in because they were born to create new spaces. Someone who, even exhausted, tries again. Who, even feeling lost, searches for a path. Who, even not knowing how ill, keeps going. You are not your inattention, you are not your procrastination, you are not your moments of overwhelm. You are the person who wakes up every day willing to try. Who fights an internal battle with no audience. Who has survived years of judgment and still manages to smile, to love, to dream. And that silent, steady, resilient strength is what makes you extraordinary. You are not a programming error. You are a rare, complex, richly coded system full of possibility. And with the right support, the right tools, the right people, that code can create things the world never imagined. You made it here. You read, you listened, you reflected. Maybe you saw yourself in words no one had ever said out loud. Maybe, for the first time in a long while, you felt truly understood. But before this conversation ends, there's something I need you to hold deep within. You are not your diagnosis. You are a person, complex, intense, profound, carrying not just symptoms, but stories, battles, scars, and dreams. ADHD is a part of you, but it's not all that defines you. It's a lens, not a label. It's a challenge, not a sentence. And while there may be pain, difficulty, and frustration, there is also light, motion, brilliance, and sensitivity. The same brain that makes you forget appointments is the one that sparks brilliant ideas. The same impulse that gets you into trouble is the one that makes you act when no one else dares to. The same restlessness that keeps you up at night is the one that drives you to question, seek, and explore. You are not less. You are different, and different can be absolutely beautiful. If you grew up feeling out of place, compared, pressured, know that you were never alone. Millions of people go through this every day, and each person who chooses to know themselves, seek help, and respect their own process helps clear the path for others to do the same. You no longer have to pretend everything's fine. You no longer have to mold yourself to a standard that was never meant for you. What you need is compassion, strategies, clarity, and above all, a gentler gaze toward yourself. Let this conversation be a hug. Let it remind you that you are not lazy, not disorganized, not broken. You are simply trying to function in a world that never gave you the instructions. But now you know, and with that knowledge, you can begin to create a new way of living, with less guilt, with more awareness, with more respect for your limits, and more pride in your own steps. You don't need to be cured of who you are. You need to find yourself, and when that happens, everything changes. Because no one can live your story for you, but you can rewrite it and make it something deeply true, courageous, and your own. And if someday you start to doubt yourself, come back here. Reread these words. Remember the strength that lives inside you, and say out loud, I am greater than any label. I am a universe in progress.